Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a Karen demanded that I let her entitled brat of a daughter test drive my semi-truck and calls the cops on me when I refuse to do so. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first story starts like this. Sarah and I had been dating for 5 years and I thought we had an amazing relationship. We were both successful professionals who owned homes in the same neighborhood. Sarah had a 13-year-old daughter, Emily, and I had an 18-year-old son, Jake, when we met in 2018. We had planned to get married, build a house together, and raise our kids as one family. The house plans were prompted by Sarah's recent diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, a condition that would eventually require her to use a wheelchair. While finalizing the design, I started doing landscaping and renovation projects on her home to increase its resale value. In total, I invested around $35,000 through my construction business with the understanding that I would be paid back when her house was sold. I kept meticulous records and invoices for every project but never pressed for payment due to our prior agreement. 6 months later, as we were scouting properties and finalizing plans for our new home, I started feeling unwell. I could not keep any food down, was vomiting frequently, and noticed blood in my stool. My abdomen also looked swollen, which was odd given our healthy lifestyles. After a battery of tests and a biopsy, I received the devastating news. I had a baseball-sized tumor in my stomach and would need to start chemotherapy immediately. During this time, Sarah's MS symptoms worsened due to the stress of her job, forcing her to take a $25,000 pay cut for a less demanding role. As my treatments began, I became extremely ill, and Sarah started spending more time at my place helping out and staying over with Emily. I suggested selling one of our houses and moving in together until our new home was ready. With my insurance coverage and the sale proceeds, we could comfortably weather the financial strain, but Sarah grew increasingly distant. Emily stopped visiting and Sarah made excuses to avoid me, then she dropped a bombshell in a text message. "I love you, but I cannot see myself taking care of someone this sick long term. I think we should stop seeing each other." Those words shattered me. Sarah was the first woman I had opened up to since my wife's passing when Jake and his sister were toddlers. I tried to be understanding, but it was a gut punch. The next day, I calmly packed Sarah's belongings and left them on her back porch while she was at work, avoiding an awkward encounter. As I placed a box under the porch cover, I saw Sarah in her living room having sex with a man I knew as her lifelong friend Tom. We had shared dinners and vacations with Tom and his girlfriend. I did not confront Sarah about it, I simply texted her saying I had left her things on my porch for her to retrieve. 8 months later, Tom's ex-girlfriend informed me that they had broken up because he had confessed to an affair with Sarah dating back to when we were finalizing our home plans. Enraged, I took action. After completing my cancer treatments, I went through my paperwork and found the $32,680 in unpaid invoices for the work I had done on Sarah's home. I promptly sent them to my lawyer to initiate lien proceedings, just as Sarah was preparing to put her house on the market. With interest accrued over 19 months and legal fees, the liens left Sarah with only $10,000 after selling her home and paying off her mortgage. She had to back out of buying a new place and move in with her older daughter, son-in-law, and grandkids. Sarah also had to leave her job and go on disability. A year ago, I ran into Sarah, who looked 2 decades older, and she was in a wheelchair, the very thing our planned home was designed to accommodate. We exchanged brief pleasantries before I excused myself. A few days later, Emily called hoping we could meet up. I gave a vague response and ended the call, then Sarah called apologizing for how she had left me. I remained cordial but firm, thanking her and hanging up. Her text continued for weeks until she asked if we could rekindle our relationship. I replied, "I cannot see myself taking care of someone so sick long term. Remember the box on your back porch? Did you think Tom brought that over from my house? Good luck to you. Goodbye." And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this story. This was actually one from r/am I the a-hole, but for some reason I could not find any comments that said whether OP is the a-hole or not. So let's do that as a community instead. Do you think OP was acting as an a-hole in this story or not? And once you're done with that, let's continue to the title story, which is titled "Insane Karen Calls 911 When I Don't Let Her Kid Drive My Semi-Truck." Let me ask you a question. After 5 years of having my good old semi-truck and traveling with it from coast to coast, taking cargo from one place to another, one would assume it belonged to me, right? Wrong. Not according to this Karen that I had the misfortune of encountering in a car dealership on a hot summer afternoon in North Carolina. I had been traveling all day, and don't get me wrong, I loved my job. I loved being on the road when it was just my truck and the music on the radio and me, just peacefully going from the middle of the mountains to a landscape with a colorful sky and the smell of the beach. But that day I had been traveling for the last 18 plus hours and I was tired. It was summer and I was entering North Carolina, where the air was just humid and the breeze I felt through the window of my truck was replaced by a warm wave or stickiness that was making me sweat. I just had to get a few cars that I had loaded in my semi-truck to the dealership, and in less than a couple of hours I could be in a hotel room with the AC on full blast having a bucket of good fried chicken. Or so I thought. At first nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Even though this was a new dealership, I had already delivered cars to other dealerships in the past, and I knew the drill. I was waiting as some workers loaded the cars off the truck, as I was signing some papers and drinking a big glass of cold water to lower the heat, when all of a sudden I heard some yelling coming from one of the dealership's back offices. I didn't pay much attention to the sound at first, as it was none of my business, but the shouting came closer and closer until I could see a woman in her early 40s with a frown as big as Alaska on her face, followed by a grumpy teenager whose features resembled whom I thought was her mother. "You're hiding things from us back there," the woman shouted, grabbing her daughter by the wrist and sprinting to the garage on the back. I looked at them in shock as a young, clearly desperate sales assistant followed as fast as her heels allowed her. "Ma'am, these are not for sale yet," the sales assistant tried to explain to the woman who was already looking at the new cars on the lot and didn't pay attention to what the saleswoman was trying to tell her. She was just inspecting the vehicles from top to bottom as I stood there in awe of the situation, or at least that was until I heard the screeching high-pitched voice of the teenager exclaim, "I want that one, Mom. I want to test drive it," she said, pointing towards my old semi-truck, as I immediately left the papers I was signing aside and went sprinting towards them. "Excuse me, that is not for sale," I tried to warn the woman. "Then what it is doing inside the dealership? This is clearly for sale," said the woman, trying to open the door to my truck. "Ma'am, stop that. That's my truck and it's not for sale," I said again to the woman, who apparently could not see properly because my truck looked used in the middle of a ton of brand new cars. The orange paint was a little scraped here and there, and the leather seats had lost some of their color and looked used due to the sun on the road. "I don't believe you. You just don't want to let my daughter drive it. I'm warning you. We arrived here first. We have the right to test drive it first." She started lashing out and wouldn't let me speak. "Ma'am," she interrupted me loudly, saying, "I want to speak to the manager," as she furiously looked around like a bulldog with rabies. The only thing missing was the drool falling from her mouth, and I swear I could picture it starting to drip at any given moment. The young sales assistant, in distress with sweat already dripping down her forehead and scared blue eyes, went running to get the manager, glad to have someone else to deal with this customer that came straight from hell apparently. Soon an old man, almost bald, wearing a tailored steel blue suit, appeared looking at all of us as the salesgirl tried to explain to him the situation, but was cut off by this unbearable Karen. "What's happening is that this man won't let my daughter test drive this car, and we have the right to go first. We arrived here more than an hour ago," the woman demanded, pointing at me. "That's my semi-truck, ma'am," I said again. "No, it's not. You haven't signed off any papers. My daughter wants that truck and I'm gonna get it for her right now," she yelled, her face turning entirely red, and I was sure it was not for the incredibly high temperatures only. "Ma'am, this truck doesn't belong to the dealership. This man was actually here to deliver—" The dealership manager was cut off by her obnoxious voice. "Then what it is doing back here? It is clear that you are hiding the good stuff from the customers. My husband bought a car here 2 years ago, so you should consider us as loyal and valuable customers and treat us with the same privileges you're giving him," she yelled, pointing towards me. "Ma'am, I'm not—" Nothing. She wouldn't even let anyone finish a single sentence before lashing out. "Mom, it's because I'm a girl and they don't want me to test drive the truck," her daughter screeched, stomping her feet with platform boots on the floor, performing a tantrum that was worthy of a 5-year-old that had missed nap time. "No, that's not true," the manager interrupted. "This gentleman is just a driver." "I'm calling the police. I'm suing you," the mother yelled. "Ma'am, I have the keys. This is my—" I tried to reason with her as I took the keys out of my pocket to show her that the truck belonged to me, but she just sprinted towards me and ripped the keys from my hands in an instant. "See, it wasn't that difficult to give my daughter the keys to test drive it," she said, going straight to open the truck door. "Give me my keys back," I yelled, going after her to get my keys. "Don't dare to come close to me. I'm calling the cops and reporting you for assault," she said, dialing the 911 number on the phone. "I'm recording him, Mom, I have evidence," said her daughter, pointing her phone with the flash on straight to my face. "Evidence of what?" I yelled, my patience already gone, as a police car parked a few meters away from us. The dealership manager had called the cops a couple minutes ago already, even before this Karen did. "What's going on here, Jack?" The police officer said with a stern voice, looking at the scene unfolding in front of his eyes with some disbelief. "They are trying to assault me and won't let my daughter test drive that truck just because she's a girl, and that's discrimination," the crazy Karen yelled. "That's not at all what's going on. The woman just stole my truck keys and won't give them back to me," I tried to tell the cop, who let out an exhausted sigh and walked towards the woman. "The keys, ma'am, please," the officer demanded. "But," she tried to talk back, but the cop just gave her a dead glare and she had no other option than to give him the keys immediately. "I want to see the car papers and each one of your identifications," the cop demanded. "They are in the glove box of my truck," I said with emphasis on my, as the cop opened the door and got the papers. Each of us handed him our IDs and it was clear that my name was the only one in the registration and the proof on insurance, which meant the truck was mine and only mine. "That is his semi-truck," the cop said with a look of disapproval towards the woman on his face as he handed me my keys back. "But that's not..." She was cut off by the police again. "Leave this property, ma'am, if you don't want to get in trouble," he demanded as she furiously looked around at all of us as she intended to kill us with her stare, but she had nothing else to do, so she grabbed her spoiled kid's wrist and dragged away from the dealership. "Thank you, Joe, for everything," the manager said to the cop, who nodded. "If I had $1 for every time I've had to deal with a Karen, I would have already retired and I'd be on a cruise to the Bahamas," said the cop as he walked away back to his car. Luckily, nothing major happened and, at the end of the day, I was finally able to rest in my hotel room with the AC on full blast and with a bucket of good fried chicken between my hands, as the incident with the Karen was nothing more than a distant memory. And the next one is titled, "Was I wrong for going to help rescue my childhood friend from a toxic relationship?" Posted by user Sakura or Sakura, I'm not sure, Wood on r/ripe stories, our own subreddit. So I, 34 female, have been friends with this girl, 33 female, since we were in middle school. We have been in and out of each other's lives for years but never had any problems. I've always been more of an older sister figure to her. She would tell me anything and everything. Last month she tells me and another friend of ours, 33 male, that we have known just as long, that her fiancé was being mentally abusive to her and spent their whole rant on stupid things that were not needed. We asked her if she wanted us to get her out right away or see how things would end up. She said she wanted out back then. So the three of us worked together and that next day drove 12 to 13 hours up to another state to get her. She already had her things packed, just waiting on us to arrive. Once we got into the city, she went ahead and called the police so that if need be, they can take the guy out of the apartment while her and I get her things to the car. Our male friend stayed in the car as it was not a parking spot. Thankfully though, the police was not needed, so they left, and from the sounds of it they probably got another call as they left with their lights on. Once we got her into the car, we drove the whole way back. So together we were on the ride for a full 24 hours to rescue her. Now she is saying that we, myself and our mutual friend that drove, had kidnapped her, forced her into the car. We did not give her any warning or anything, just showed up, packed her things up, and our male friend had forcefully placed her into the car. She has blocked all three of us in the same breath as saying that he has been beating his wife. When their roommate heard this, she asked so I can hear, "What bruises? Where?" "I've been here for months and never seen him put hands on you. I know this man, he is not violent." I feel hurt that she begged us to come rescue her, and then a week later she takes a train up there to live with the guy again. And yeah, Riper Stars, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Do you think OP was the a-hole here and actually kidnapped this person or not? Honestly, to me, it did not really sound like a kidnapping, but if I were OP, I probably would not want anything to do with that person again. And the next one is titled Honeymoon Issues. My husband, male 32, and I, female 24, just got married 3 weeks ago and we are currently celebrating our honeymoon. The plan was to travel for 2 months for different countries of Europe, Asia and Africa. We are currently in Spain and we are supposed to take a plane to Morocco in 2 days. However, my husband wants to cut the trip short and go back to our home now. The thing is, his brother is in a horrible situation, his wife and daughter had a car crash and they are on the hospital. The kid is fine, but his wife has to be a little longer in the hospital, and that's all I know. I told my husband that I understand he wants to support his brother, but that he is not a doctor, so he cannot do anything to help really. And also, his brother's wife is fine, she probably only has a broken leg or something, and that's why she needs some more days in the hospital. I told him to just call his brother and ask to talk with his wife so he can send her his best wishes, and that's all that he can do, honestly. His parents and his in-laws are helping with the kids, so there's really nothing they need help in. I told him our honeymoon was important because it's a time for ourselves to enjoy and spend time together. He was not having any of it, he called me selfish, and then he kicked me out of our bedroom. I had to ask for a new one until he decided to let me in again. He told me that he is leaving tomorrow because he needs to be supportive of his brother and told me I can continue the trip by myself. But that's not the point of a honeymoon at all. I told him so, and he said that if he would have known how witchy I was, he would have never dated me. Am I really in the wrong here? Comment number 1, does not matter how well your in-laws are doing. The only important thing is here that your husband does not feel right staying away from his family in this time of need. Your husband is not having fun with you right now, he is not enjoying your company because his mind is elsewhere and he is worried for his brother. Yes, it's 100% wrong of you to ask him to disregard his own feeling just so he can keep your company for your own little sake. You are the a-hole. Comment number 2, unpopular opinion, but not the a-hole. No one died or is on life support from the sounds of it. No major surgeries, the brother has support. I would not expect my brother to cut his honeymoon short to come home, especially if I had several others helping me out already. If someone had died, was near death or was severely disabled, it would be different. And yeah, ripe stars, please let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the a-hole or not? To be honest guys, I'm kind of torn in this case and I'm not really sure. On the one hand, I would sort of agree with the second comment considering that really no one died and there don't seem to be any severe injuries, so you don't necessarily have to go back to the hospital. However, I can also understand the hubby that he cannot really have a good time anymore right now and that he feels bad for his brother and that's why he's not able to enjoy the honeymoon anymore. I mean, you cannot really change your feelings, so it's not really hubby's fault, and that's why I think I would keep a neutral opinion on this one. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Before I moved out when I was still in college, I could see for myself how horrible of a person she really was. With no exaggeration, we could not do anything that did not involve Karen having a fit over it. If you wanna know why I call her Karen, it's only partially due to the entitlement and general a-hole nature she walks around with. She simply flat out looks like a Karen too. She has a short haircut with blonde highlights in it, and while it is not a perfect match for the "I wanna speak to a manager" haircut, it comes pretty close. She is also on husband number 3, and at this point I think it's more plastic and synthetic material than anything else. Even when she seems to just run out of her house, she has so much makeup caked onto her face that must have taken an hour to do. Cheap perfume that makes me choke if I ever get too close to her, which I wouldn't wanna do anyway. And to top it all off, a handbag that consistently holds a small dog with a big yappy mouth. Even as a teenager, I knew that she was not the nicest person from my limited interactions. Like when I would take out the trash and she would complain that I put the cans too close to her property, even though it was nowhere near them. And then telling me that teenagers are all slobs and I probably did not even sort out the recycling because kids my age wanna kill the planet. My parents did not really tell me much about what she did when I was that age, but I sure told them. I was instructed to just try and avoid Karen and to not engage with her and start a fight. I assumed it was one of those things where since I was just a teenager, they wanted me to always respect adults. I now know it's because she was crazy and they were concerned about what might happen if I did get into a fight with her. It did not help that I was mixed and looked a lot more like my black dad than my white mom. The last thing they wanted was that this white Karen was calling about a black guy yelling at her and her being scared. Anyway, when I was in college though, I started doing more around the house and it meant I was gonna probably run into Karen a lot more. My parents finally told me that they had problems with her for years and I had to keep an eye out. One fight I had with Karen was when I saved up from my job and got a cheap car to drive back and forth to college in. I was at a school about 20 minutes away, and a good way to save money was to live with my parents still instead of living on campus in a dorm. My job was minimum wage, so the car I ended up getting was a used disaster. You could tell it was beat up by looking at it, but for a lot of college kids, that's the first kind of car they will get. I was just happy to not have to take the bus system anymore and have a 20-minute drive take over an hour. Now, both of my parents had their own cars, but since they worked, I could not use them. It also meant there was no room in the driveway for me to park my car. And if I parked it in the back by the garage, it would mean having to move both cars at like 6 AM just to get mine out and then moving theirs back in. So I opted to just park in the street in front of the house. Karen hated this and threw so many fits about my horrible car and it making hers look bad because of how close it was. Street parking was legal though, so I just ignored her. The car was crap and she couldn't do much to make it worse. After college, I moved out of my parents' home, and that was when my mom got sick. She had stage 4 cancer and a tumor that could not be operated on. While I was not living there, I was over a lot because I knew I did not have much time left with my mother. Karen would complain about all the times we had to call an ambulance to the house, and that was the first time I lost it at her. I started screaming that she was heartless and so entitled that she never cared about anybody else. I was a mess because that time was really bad and we called the ambulance because she was not breathing. I was just crying and insulting her until my dad pulled me away to the car so we could follow to the hospital. My mom passed away that night. 3 years later is when my dad's health started to decline as well. During those 3 years, I did not see or interact with Karen at all. My dad had been giving me updates though about all the small crap that she was trying to get away with. At one point she tried to hire landscapers to dig up the yard for something we never found out, but pointed out the area to dig would be on my parents' property and my dad was quick to stop that. Things were just really different without my mom and my dad seemed to lose the will to take care of himself properly anymore. Being in your 20s and losing both parents is extremely hard. I did not need anything to make the situation more stressful or difficult. I knew that my dad had a will, and since I was his only child, he flat out told me he was leaving me everything, including the house. I knew that it made more sense to sell it and stay where I was, but I could not bring myself to do that. The house had so many memories that I just was not ready to let go of. It would cost a bit more to take over the mortgage and a longer drive to work, but I was willing to put up with that. Karen being my neighbor actually did not cross my mind when I was making the decision. Before I could move in though, my parents' lawyer contacted me saying that there was a problem. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I think this was lost somewhere here in the text, I'm not sure why. Maybe because I had to edit out some slightly offensive words, I'm not sure, for YouTube. But basically, OP's parents both died. Just so you know that. But anyway, the will was being contested and another will in my dad's name surfaced. This other will claimed that everything, including the house, was to be left to Karen. I knew this did not make any sense and the lawyer agreed with me that he knew the will leaving everything to me was the legit one. To prove it though, we would have to go to court and in the meantime nobody was allowed to live in the house. I was devastated because I wanted nothing more than to just be in the house and have that smell of my dad that lingered in things like his clothes and pillow. Instead, I was barred from even going in and all of that sadness was turned to rage towards the neighbor Karen. I was told not to do anything stupid like threaten her because it could be seen as bad in court. My lawyer advised me to just stay away and not make any contact with Karen outside of the legal process. This also meant things like the money side of my inheritance was frozen, that I cared less about, but still I wanted to make sure that Karen did not get her greedy, slimy hands all over it. I channeled all of my emotions into destroying Karen in front of that judge, finding every possible shred of evidence to prove that her will was phony and that she forged it to steal my inheritance. Plus looking up laws about how many charges could be thrown against her for what she did. While really I knew that it would be a criminal case and out of my hands. We got to court and I was ready to demolish Karen with everything I had. It turns out that she was capable of hurting herself without me really needing to do much at all. The first problem right away is that her most important witness was not there, the lawyer who drafted the will, and whose name was on it. That was kind of an important person for her to bring, and I honestly have a feeling that he either did not exist or he had no idea that his name was being used. Either way, she was still cocky and so sure that she was gonna get the property. I wanted to get right into the business of things, but she wanted to try and make it personal. She started fake crying and going on about how my parents were such good friends and it was a shame to see them go so soon. That they always came to her about problems they were having with me, how I apparently dropped out of school and had horrible drug problems. Karen was trying to milk it for everything she could while we both knew her and my parents hated each other. This caused the judge to start asking questions about me relating to drug use. I told him that I graduated from college and never had an issue with drugs. In fact, my job has random drug testing and I even offered to get those results sent to the judge. None of this had to do with the will, it was just Karen wanting to make herself look good and me bad. The only reason she was allowed is because it was her reasoning for why she would be getting the property instead of me, the next of kin. It was a scummy strategy, but I did not let it deter me from my actual evidence. Karen was asked about the dates of the will being accurate and she confirmed that they were. Now her will was dated a few months later than the one I had. That means it superseded mine and could technically be seen as the more accurate one. I had something that she really did not count on, and that was my dad's bank history. After mom died, my dad put my name on his bank account in case anything happened to him. Now, I never got a card for it or gave it much attention until this happened. I was able to go to that date in his records and it showed no money being given to that lawyer. There was no record of money exchange, and since their fake lawyer was not there, he could not prove it either. The ball was in my court and I was ready to start rolling it and picking up everything. I showed the judge records of police being called by Karen against my family, where she had comments on the official complaint saying how much she hated my family, especially my black father. She did not have anything except her fake story and the forged will. The judge concluded that my will was real, while hers was a forgery. Now, while forgery is illegal on its own, forgery of a will is even worse. It's a type of felony and it gets bumped up, which means the time she could spend in prison would be even longer. I knew this from my own research. She was arrested for that forgery and I was finally allowed to go back into my parents', which is now mine, house. It felt a bit bittersweet because while I was happy about winning, I was upset about my parents. It took about 2 days for me to move all my things in and set myself back up in my old room. I was not ready to move my dad's things out of his room yet. My life was finally getting back on some kind of track after the whole thing. To be totally transparent, I kind of forgot about the fact that Karen was gonna need to wait for a trial and possibly get out on bail, if what happened next did not end up occurring. I was sleeping one night and heard the sound of the door being forced open. I know all the weird noises my house makes, and that was not one of the normal ones. I got up and grabbed a baseball bat that I have grown accustomed to having near my bed since I started living alone after college. I creeped downstairs and lo and behold, Karen was standing in my entryway looking around. Me? What the F are you doing in my house? You did not cause enough trouble already? Karen, we both know that I deserve this house more than you. A child being gifted a house without knowing a day of hard work or sacrifice. You made me lose so much money with that crap you pulled in court. I think it's only fair I go through the stuff that doesn't even belong to you and take some. Me? You're not taking anything of mine or that belong to my parents. Turn around and get the F out of my house. The cops are gonna love what you decided to do after probably getting out on bail. Karen reacted harshly to my threat of calling the cops and telling them what she did. She lifted one of her hands and I saw for the first time that she had been holding a knife the entire time. It was not anything huge, a typical pocket knife. However, a weapon is a weapon though. Karen, how about I give you one chance? Get the F out of the house, that should have been mine, or I will cut your throat. She lunged at me with the knife and managed to catch a part of my arm. It was not a deep cut, but it sure stung. I did not actually think that she was gonna use it, but now that she did, I was not gonna risk anything. I swung the bat at her knee and I heard a crack. She went to the ground but was still trying to crawl towards me with the knife. I hit her a second time with the bat and she was just quiet. I actually was scared that I might have killed her, but called the cops anyway. When they arrived, I told them about her breaking in and threatening to kill me before attacking me with a knife. That she was trying to steal from me and then wanted me to leave altogether. Also, the history that we had and that she was on bail right now awaiting trial to my knowledge. She still even had the knife in her hand and it had my blood on it. While I was talking to that cop, another one was checking on Karen and making sure that she was breathing. She was, but it was clear that I had done some damage to her knee. She was arrested for breaking and entering, assault and battery. Keep in mind, this was on top of her separate charge from before that was still ongoing. I live in an area that has a stand your ground law. That means since she had a weapon and was trying to use it on me, I was within my right to use force to protect myself. I just want to mention this because some of you might wonder why I was not getting arrested for assault and battery as well. If you don't live in a place that has a stand your ground type of law, I don't know if doing something like I did would result in you getting arrested as well. She was sent back to jail to await trial for the forgery and the new charges. This time she was not going to get bail since the first thing she did when getting out was to hunt me down with ill intent. She was forced to wait there until trial where she was found guilty on all charges. She got 7 years in prison for the forgery and an extra 3 added on when she was found guilty of the other charges as well. After probably 2 decades of harassing my parents and then me, she was finally getting what she deserved. I could only wish that my parents were alive to see the day that Karen finally lost. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.